I just got out of the shower. My hair looks a little crazy. I'm trying to stretch it because I'm going to get it done. But anyway, as I was in the shower, I was thinking about our fertility journey. And I was just thinking about the stages of the fertility process. I remember like when I first had my bone marrow transplant, the doctors, they told me beforehand, they were like, yeah, like there's a possibility that your fertility will be at risk. And honestly, up until I had my bone marrow transplant, I don't think I knew anything about my female body. I didn't know anything about ovulation. I didn't know anything about the stages of the follicular stage and the luteal phase. And honestly, those things are still not 100% clear to me. I mean, I understand enough of it, but I don't think I had ever heard of those stages. I did not realize that so much went into the female body. I did not realize the ovaries functions and the importance of estrogen and progesterone. I didn't understand any of it. And when the doctors told me that my fertility would be at risk, I never even understood. I never even knew the impact what them giving me chemotherapy was going to do to my hormonal health. I mean, honestly, if I would have known, I might have taken a second thought about if I wanted to go through the transplant, because what I've gone through hormonally over my bone marrow transplant was 9 years ago. I'll be 10 years in May of 2025. And if I would have known what the transplant was going to do to me, I don't know if I would have kept sickle cell. I mean, we just had a family member who passed away at 40 of sickle cell about a week ago. And sickle cell was a really, really, really hard disease. And the pain that you go through when you have sickle cell, I wouldn't wish on anybody. But also going through the hormonal fluctuations that I've gone through since I'm 35 now, be 36 on Monday. If I would have known how important hormones are, how they regulate your skin, your hair, your nails, your mood. I mean, I feel like I have always dealt with really bad anxiety and depression, but I had no idea how chemotherapy would exacerbate that for me when I had the transplant. Constantly like trying to figure out the dosing of being on hormone replacement therapy. Basically, they told me when I was 27 that my body was in menopause. That's what they told me. And because I was getting periods from the HRT, I would get these bleeds every month. I did not register like what that meant. So I think in my mind, I always thought, yes, I'm going to be able to have children. Everything in my life has always worked out. Everything that I've ever wanted, God has always allowed for it to work out for me. So when I was 26 and I signed on the dotted line to have the transplant, I was like, okay, God, I don't have the money to freeze my eggs. So I'm just going to get this transplant. And I know that you know that I want children. And so I'm just gonna sign on the dotted line, get the transplant, and yeah, like I'll have kids. Like it'll work out fine. I really just had no inkling in my mind that like it would not work out. I mean, I wanted to do beauty pageants. I did that. I wanted to move to Los Angeles and be famous. I never was famous, but I was a guest star here or there, and I booked commercials and I did voiceover, and I was like living the dream in LA that I wanted when I was 18. I never made it to Miss USA, but I was 4th runner-up to Miss Nevada USA. I almost made it. And so I just kind of, I always wanted to go to UCLA. I got into UCLA. Everything that I always wanted always worked out for me. So yes, I cried before my transplant. I went back and forth with my best friend at the time to telling her, like, I don't have the money to do this. In hindsight, I wish I would have Ubered. I wish I would have done anything in my power to freeze my eggs, because what my husband and I have gone through with regard to fertility, I wouldn't wish on any couple. I know couples have all kinds of things that they have to deal with: infidelity, trust issues, money, family problems. But my husband and I, we love each other so much. He is literally my best friend. I feel like God designed him specifically for me. I feel like I have never loved, I mean, obviously I love my mom very much, but I have never loved a man in the capacity that I love him. I love spending time with him. I love vacationing with him. I love watching shows with him. I mean, we go to the gym together, and I know people say, oh, it's the honeymoon phase. You know, we're almost 3 years together and we're still having fun together. We still love talking. We have passionate conversations. We have disagreements, but he is my favorite person in the world. And when you meet the love of your life, the person that you feel like you were made for, and you just want to create with them, you want to do the very thing that God designed for you to do, and you can't. It is the most heartbreaking thing in the world. It's very heartbreaking. It's a feeling of powerlessness, because, you know, as a wife, you know, the thing that really brings me the most solace these days is watching animal videos. I just watch animal videos, specifically lions. I just have been really loving lion videos lately. I watch so many lion videos. We've actually started watching the animal videos together. It's been very calming. But it's just so interesting that in the animal kingdom, it's all about, you know, procreation. It's about protecting your young. It's about eating and family, feeding your family. And I think when I was 26, 27, and just growing up, I think I bought the lie that society was selling of like, yeah, like, I mean, I always was a dreamer, and I always, you know, loved acting and singing and performing and entertaining people. And I always wanted to see my name in lights and to do that. But I feel like I was even more so sold that when I was in LA. I don't feel like anybody is out here telling young women, oh my gosh, yes, when you get out of college, find your partner, put an emphasis on dating, find a quality person that you want to be with, and have children, have a family. Because honestly, that's really what matters the most. Like, at the end of the day, yes, you can book a job or you can go to work, but having community around you and having family, having kids, having cousins around, there's nothing more fulfilling than family. There's nothing like the love between family. And if I would have thought more about that when I was 26, 27, I think I wouldn't have been spending so much money on beauty pageants just to compete in Miss California USA. I think on my final year, I want to say it was $3,000 to compete in Miss California USA. I think it was $3,000. It was either $2,000 or $3,000. Nonetheless, that is a shit ton of money. That was just to compete in the pageant, just to walk on the stage. That's not including hair, makeup, nails, evening gown. And my last year, I wanted to win so badly. I spent $6,000 on an evening gown. So that was a year before my bone marrow transplant. And ask me if, I think that they just increased the age of Miss California, of all the pageants. I don't think that there's an age limit now, but imagine, like, I could have frozen my eggs. I made a way to spend that money on the pageants. I made a way to spend $400 a month on acting classes. But when it came to freezing my eggs, I left it to chance. I left it to chance. And I wish that, you know, my mom has never been married. My aunts haven't really been married. People in my family are not really married. And I'm not certain that any of them have ever met the love of their lives or ever felt the way I feel about my husband. And so my husband always tells me, he's like, Cierra, you, like, there was no one around you to tell you that this was really important. But I would tell any young girl, like, if you're in a health crisis or if you're in a situation and you don't know if you should forego, I mean, obviously, if you have a really bad cancer or something like that and you can't wait and you cannot freeze your eggs, you can't do that right away, then don't do it. Like, save your own life. But if you're in a position to freeze your eggs and right now it doesn't seem like it's important and you can't see past it, I'd say freeze your eggs, because I believe for you that God is going to give you somebody that you love so much, like somebody who's going to look at you, and when they look at you, like, the world stops, because you can tell that you are the apple of their eye. And you'll want to have a family. You'll want that. You'll want to be able to create with your person. You'll want that. And so anyway, just talking about the animal kingdom, it's interesting because people just are like, oh, you guys can just adopt. You can just adopt. It's like, okay, that's great. Like, thank you for telling me to adopt. I'm actually super blessed that God has put several people in my life who have gone through the adoption process, and they have told me the love is all the same, etc., that it's been such a wonderful, profound experience for them. I actually nannied when I was in Los Angeles while chasing the dream of acting, and one of the moms I nannied for had an adopted son, and I've gotten to pick her brain about things, and she loves her son so much. But I just feel like people try to tell you that it's a replacement. And yes, like, there is adoption. That's not something that is on the table for us at the moment. But I think that there's something to be said about wanting to see yourself and your husband in a little person. And I think that sometimes people think that just because you adopt, that takes away that pain. I mean, we were literally created to create. Like, it's very simple. Life is really simple, actually. It's not about the money, it's about family. You can see that. Well, sometimes the animals eat their young. So they're not a very good barometer for that. But people are just always telling us to adopt, and you're just like, shut up. Like, we know it exists. I think the stages of fertility are, for me, I left it to chance, and I was like, oh yeah, like, it'll work out for me. And then I also thought, like, I eat so healthy. At the time, I was just in the last 6 months, I have been more on a carnivorous diet for the first time in my life. But up until age 35, I have always been a fruit and veggie girl, pushing green juice, juicing every day, just a juice girl. And honestly, up until this year, I really believe that I have been severely malnourished, severely. And so I thought, you know, like, I'm healthy. Like, I drink green juice. Like, I walk, I work out every day. I take all the herbs. I have all the supplements. Like, you name it, I have it, you know? And I think that when I met my husband, I was already like, yeah, I told him, I was like, hey, like, I had this bone marrow transplant and the doctors have said X about my fertility, but I had never been actively trying to get pregnant. And so, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, like, we'll figure it out. I think we both thought that we could just throw money at it and it would fix it. And so we started the process, and very shortly before we started the process, like barely getting into the process, they told us within a week, like, yeah, her body's not responding to any of these drugs. So you guys are not going to be able to. And I still just had the attitude of, no, it's going to work. Like, I'm healthy. I'm just going to go home, drink more green juice. We'll see some follicles. I think I thought like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go have more healthy stuff. And that wasn't the case. And then it was even more of it. We would get into arguments because, when you're a Christian or you're a believer, you get mad at your spouse because you're like, you're not believing. You want them to believe. I would get so mad at him because I never felt like he was super optimistic. I think there's been moments where he's been optimistic, but I feel like for the most part, he's kind of been like, I don't know. And so I would get so mad. I would be like, no, we need to pray harder. We need to fast. We need to pray. Like before I met him, I did affirmations. I recorded affirmations for how I wanted my life to look. And this kind of stuff always worked for me. I remember I went into my voiceover space. I didn't have a booth at the time. I have a booth now. But I went into my voiceover space. It was a closet. And I recorded this track. And it was everything that I envisioned for my life. I am married to the love of my life. We have the most amazing life together. We travel. We have a great intimate life. We study the Bible together. We eat out. Like, it was a very detailed track. And I mean, I was single as can be during this time in my life. But when I did this track, I would listen to it. The track was about 33 minutes long. And I would listen to this track every single day. Morning, when I'm getting dressed, night. And even though I was single, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I am married. I believed the track so much. Like, it was in my soul and in my heart because I was just like listening to myself talk as if it was already so. As if it was already so, I was just like listening to this affirmation track. And you couldn't tell me I was not married. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm married to the love of my life. I was single as could be, but in my mind and my heart, I was like married to the love of my life. And it worked. I think I listened to that track for like a year and a half, and I'll have to go into that another time, but it worked. The affirmations worked. So in my mind, like, the affirmations were going to work for this too, for the fertility. I am ovulating. I can feel the eggs being rejuvenated. I mean, we're talking, I've done all the tracks, listened to them, and I'm like, yeah, like, my husband doesn't know. He doesn't know who I am. Like, I am that girl. Like, I can bring forth anything. Like, I am the apple of God's eye. Like, it's gonna happen. So I'm listening to the affirmation tracks. I'm praying. I'm getting people to pray for me. I'm listening to the praise and worship, really just trying to get my body in the atmosphere. And I honestly have been doing this even before I met him. Like, I was speaking fertility blessings over my body even before I met him. So when I met him, I was like, okay, like, I was like, it's him now in my mind. Like, even though I went through chemotherapy, I was like, it's him. He's not believing. He is not praying hard enough. So God has to teach him. God has to move him. So I think that, I don't know, I guess the stages of infertility are optimism, more optimism, like, oh, I'm going to get these vitamins. But honestly, I will say, if you're on the fertility journey and you do not eat organ meat, beef liver, raw cow's milk, I have seen lots of testimonies of people who went on the carnivore diet and cut out vegetables, which I've listened to some scientists, and they talked about how greens and vegetables actually served as, they would give it to people to make them infertile. And I will say, like, that's a whole other thing, but if you are on the infertility train, just because of PCOS or endometriosis, and you haven't had something as catastrophic like me, like chemotherapy, happen to your body, I would say try cutting the vegetables and having raw ground beef, rare steak, beef liver, beef heart, raw cow's milk. It will change your life. At one point, the doctors told us that they thought they saw a follicle, and we were so hopeful. But then we had a meeting a week later and they were like, psych. But anyway, I guess with fertility, it's optimism for me. It was affirmations. It was more prayer, more praise and worship, more vitamins. Then blaming, like it's him. Like in my mind, I was like, it's him. Like he's not believing. So maybe if we're not together anymore and I'm with somebody else, like the fantasies are crazy, right? Like when you go through infertility, like the fantasies are crazy, because then you're like, if you're a faith person, maybe you have the thought like, oh my God, like if I was with a believer, I mean, my husband is a believer, but I was like, if I was with somebody who was even more of a believer, we would have a child right now because their faith would be as strong as mine. So I think I went through like a period of blame. And so there's blame, there's optimism. And I think even last year when the doctors called us on the day before Thanksgiving, which was a shit show for us, when we had gone through one round of IUI before they called us and said it's not going to work, I kind of like laughed about it in my mind, because I was like, they're so stupid. Like, God's got this. Like, God doesn't want it to happen like this. God doesn't want us to have intervention from a fertility clinic. They're just dumb. And like, my husband is falling for this. Why is he falling for this? Because he was really upset. I was upset, but I was upset. But I also, in the back of my mind, I still thought like, yeah, like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So here we are, another year later. It has not happened. I have changed my diet, which I do think I've changed my body completely from being on a more carnivorous diet in 4 months. But I think on the last appointment that we had, back in September, I think I finally arrived at acceptance. I actually have been documenting a lot of videos, and I haven't posted them, but just a lot of videos of me talking to myself about fertility, days I'm optimistic, days I'm just a mess. And I actually have the video of the day that I accepted it. We left the doctor and I just felt deflated in September. I thought, yeah, it's not going to happen. And I accepted it. I accepted, like, life is not fair. And yes, like, I've gotten the man, I've had some career success, but this is like not gonna happen for me. I accepted it. And the thing is like, people say, like, my husband and I have had many conversations about the donor egg thing, and I think for me, probably because I've been in entertainment a lot, I have these really crazy fantasies where it's like, I've had fantasies where I'm like, okay, like, what if I get the donor egg and then something happens to me and then I die, and then he meets like the donor egg lady, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is my real baby mama. I know it sounds really silly out loud, and I hate to even like say that out loud, that something could happen. Like, God bless me, nothing's happening. But I've had these just really crazy fantasies, and then you start looking up things online, and There's people who don't like their own biological children. There's people who are like, I don't like my son. I don't like my daughter. I mean, I read the mom blogs. I'm not a mom yet, but I read the blogs. Women who are like, I regret being a mom. This is a terrible experience. Not everyone's having the best parenthood experience. And so I thought like, oh my gosh, like what if I get this donor egg and like, what if I don't like the child? Not only are they not biologically mine, but what if I just don't even like them? I mean, and here's the deal, like I could not like my own biological child. I think there's also the stage of, I'm going to come back to the donor egg thing, but I think there's also the stage of you tell yourself you don't want kids, because the truth is like, I went to the gym this morning. Yesterday, I've spent the last 3 days on my hair. You know, the first day I had to do my pre-poo. Yesterday I did a deep condition. Today I just rinsed out the deep conditioner. I went to the gym. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm gardening. I'm just kind of doing whatever I want. Me and my husband went to New York last weekend without a care in the world. So I think also maybe to mask the pain, you just start saying, oh yeah, like maybe I don't really need kids. Maybe I don't really need them because like I have a really good life. Like we have freedom, and there's other people who are like, oh my God, these kids are driving me nuts. They're cursing, they won't eat, they eat too much, they're hanging out with the wrong people, they think they know it all. Oh my gosh, another football game. I mean, you hear the moms complaining and you're like, oh, like maybe the grass is greener over here. Like maybe I have it good. But then you also have those moments when you go to the gym. And for me, I see this really beautiful lady and she's in her 60s. She's so pretty. I went up to her. I kept staring at her. I was like, you're so pretty. I had to go up to her because I kept looking at her because she was so pretty. And I was like, what do you do to your skin? Like, you're so beautiful. And she's like, oh, I've been doing skincare my whole life. And so she told me she was in her 60s and she's just a very pretty lady at the gym. And then we went out into the lobby and she had this little kid that was like 2. I was like, you have a baby? And she was like, no, it's my grandbaby. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, God, if you smiled on this lady at 60, like, we're gonna have a problem. And so anyway, like, I am talking to her, and when I came home, I was thinking to myself, like, Cierra, you're so, at this point, we're going back to the donor egg thing. You're so against the donor egg, but do you also want to rob yourself of this? Like, even though mommying can be hard in the moment when the kids are 2, 3, 4, 5, 13, 15, 16, 18, but do you really want to rob yourself of the birthday parties, the graduations, the wedding, the grandparent time when, you know, you and your husband are old and it's really hard to see past, like, this moment in time, because yes, like it's great now, like we have total autonomy over our lives. But I have a girlfriend and she said to me that she gets really annoyed with her husband because he's constantly trying to tell their 11-year-old, like, you need to do this because when you get older, and she's like, why is he telling her when she gets older? All she can see right now is her 11-year-old life. She's like, that's like somebody trying to tell you how you're going to feel when you're 75 and you're 35 now. It's so hard to even comprehend getting to 75-year-old version of yourself. Just like when I was 26, I couldn't imagine a damn near 36-year-old version of myself. And so I'm also in this space now of there's so much riding on the fertility of, you're like, oh, like, if I don't do this, I'm talking about the donor egg, if I don't do this, am I then going to be experiencing even more heartbreak when I'm in my 70s and maybe my mom and my aunts are not around? Because right now my mom, you know, she's been going to a lot of funerals lately. My mom has been going to a lot of funerals, and my grandmother's generation, like there's a few of them left. They're in their 90s, but my mom's generation is almost the last generation we have, you know, of 60s going into 70s. And it's like, yeah, like right now we rely on them for family time. But what happens when that day comes that maybe they're not here? Will there be loneliness? Will there be deep grief that I didn't create a family? You know, I watched this video on the there was a donor egg video, and these kids, this woman donated her eggs, and these kids were born, and they were like, oh my God, it makes so much sense now. Like, they found out that they were donor egg children, and they wanted to have this relationship with the donor egg mom. And when I think about that, like maybe going through this process, when I think about it, maybe raising these kids, and then when they're 18, they're like, yeah, that's actually the lady that we're so much like her. It makes so much sense. You have that fear. I mean, these kids were like jumping up and down, like so happy to meet the donor egg lady. And you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to be going through this heartbreak all over again if I do this? And I think also, like, when you have your husband or your spouse, you're like, I want my husband to see me and these kids. I want him to see me. I want him to have a piece of me. You know, like, that's what you want. Like, when I see the kids, I'm like, I want a piece of him, which I'd be getting. I mean, they say that there's epigenetics or whatever if you do the donor egg thing. And so, there's so many moving parts to this journey. I think that my same girlfriend, the one I was just mentioning who has the 11-year-old, she's like, Cierra, we only care about people who are in proximity to us. Like, and she's right. Sometimes she makes it sound so simple. She's like, I don't have a relationship with my paternal grandmother because I didn't really spend a lot of time growing up with her. I grew up with my maternal grandmother. That's the one that I'm closest to. And she's passed on now, but I just don't have a relationship with my paternal grandmother. And I'm just like, okay, I know that sounds bad, but I didn't spend time there. That relationship wasn't watered. And my dad and I are not even super close. We're not super close. And even my girlfriend, the one that I have these deep conversations with, she's like a sister to me. I was able to cultivate that with her. She's literally like a sister. If she called me and she told me, I need you to come to LA right now, I would go to LA to be with her. And so I know that family is what you make it. And I think that that's like where I'm at now, is like, even though there's these deep-rooted fears of, oh my gosh, my husband's gonna see this other woman. It's like, oh, this is like another woman's baby with my husband. I'm like, no, it will be our baby. And it's hard. And there's so many stages to it, but I have regret for not freezing my eggs, and I don't want to continue to have regret when I get older. Seeing my friends, and they have their grandbabies, and the graduations and the birthday parties, and, you know, the magic of Christmas and Thanksgiving. And so when I think about that, I'm like, I can do this. I can get the donor egg. I can be pregnant. It's not what I wanted it to be. It's not what I envisioned for my life. But I have a lot to be grateful for. I will get to have a piece of my husband. And I think there's also, I think the last part I'll say too is, I think that sometimes, because I'm also very into health and wellness, I've also had the thought, like, should we be making our body do something it doesn't want to do Like, should we be taking all these fertility drugs? Should we do that? And I've struggled with that immensely because I'm like, my body's already been through so much with sickle cell, with the bone marrow transplant. I've had knee surgery from being through so much chemo and steroids. I've had knee surgery. I've had my gallbladder taken out, which, regret that. Didn't really know much about that when I was 18. Let them do that. And so you just start thinking, like, do you make your body do something it's not doing on its own? But I just pray and I ask God, like, to lead me and to guide me. Anyway, this was a rant. I just wanted to get my thoughts out about the stages of fertility. Maybe you're feeling like this. It is a very hard, isolating journey. Unless you've been through it, you can't really understand unless you've been through it. Especially if you are with the love of your life. Because that makes it all the more hard, because you're like, oh my God, like, we're best friends. We would be awesome together. Like, we would do this so well together. So, yeah. I guess we don't all get what we want, right? Everyone doesn't get everything they want. But, yeah, it's a journey. It's a process. So,